Welcome to Daedalus Debugger, a podcast series conceived by Lucianoambrosini and co-created with me, Ave. Today we will discuss designing the future, AI, and the evolution of the built environment. Enjoy your listening.
Okay, so AI and architecture, right? It's kind of wild how much buzz there is around AI these days.
Yeah, it's everywhere you look, right?
It's like phones, cars.
Yeah.
Are they going to be designing our buildings next?
Well, we're going to be diving into that today, actually.
We've got some really interesting sources for this deep dive.
Yeah, should be interesting.
So first up, Neil Leech.
Oh, I like him.
His book, Architecture in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, he basically lays out how AI could completely revolutionize architecture, like from the ground up.
It's a pretty mind-blowing look at the future.
And then we've got Machine Hallucinations. It's a collection of essays, also edited by Leech.
That one's a bit out there.
Yeah, the title's a little freaky, I know, but we'll unpack it. And to round things out, we're going to tap into this interview with AI expert Kai-Fu Lee. He's got some really interesting thoughts on China's role in the AI world and like what it could mean for architecture globally.
Yeah, he's got his finger on the pulse for sure.
Okay, so before we get too far, let's back up a sec.
Yeah.
When a lot of people hear AI, they think like robots, right? Like walking, talking.
Yeah,
like
Terminator or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's obviously way more complicated than that.
Yeah, way more. And there are a lot of terms that get thrown around which can be confusing. Like, before we even get into how AI is impacting architecture, we should probably define what AI even means.
Right. Let's break it down.
So think of AI as like the big umbrella term.
Mm-hmm.
It covers any time a machine can do something that would normally take, human intelligence.
Gotcha. So AI is like the big picture.
Right.
What about all those other terms you hear, like machine learning, deep learning, all that stuff?
Right. So under the AI umbrella, you've got machine learning. That's where machines learn from data without being specifically programmed for every single step.
So instead of us telling them exactly what to do, they kind of figure it out on their own.
Exactly. They analyze information, look for patterns, and then use that to improve how they do things.
Interesting.
And then deep learning, that's a subset of machine learning. It uses these things called artificial neural networks.
Neural networks like in our brains?
Kinda, yeah. It's based on that idea. But basically, they have multiple layers. Hence, deep learning to process just tons of information.
Okay, so it's like layers of intelligence, each one building on the last one.
You got it.
That reminds me of something Leech said in his book about how early AI was all about being programmed. Like someone would literally have to sit there and feed it instructions.
Very manual.
Exactly. But today's AI, it's learning, it's constantly evolving, which, totally changes the game.
For sure. It's way more dynamic. And that actually brings us to how this is all playing out in architecture. Like, think about the software tools that architects use every day. Many of them already use AI, even if we don't realize it.
So AI is already in architecture? It's not some far-off thing?
Not at all. Algorithms can, generate design options, figure out the best way to structure a building, even analyze the conditions of a site.
Wow, so it's like having a super-powered assistant working with you.
In a way, yeah. And it ties into something Kai-Fu Lee talks about, how AI is becoming more and more accessible, which is huge.
So it's not just these giant tech companies that have access to it anymore.
Right. And that accessibility, it just opens up so many possibilities, allows for really rapid development. Incorporating user feedback, making it a more responsive tool for architects.
That's really interesting. So this idea of AI being more accessible, it kind of makes me think about that next book we were going to talk about.
Machine Hallucinations.
Yeah, that one. Is that even something architects need to worry about?
I think it's something we should be excited about, honestly.
Really? The title alone makes it sound like, I don't know, kind of creepy.
Yeah, it's definitely thought-provoking.
Okay, so machine hallucinations. What are we even talking about here? Are we talking about AI actually having visions?
Not exactly. It's more about the output, the things that AI can create. AI image generation tools, they're trained on these massive, massive data sets of images, right?
Okay.
And from those images, they learn to recognize patterns, different styles, all that. And then they use that information to create something new.
So they're learning from what we've already created.
Right. But because they're working with so much data, the results can be really unexpected. They can be kind of surreal even.
So it's not just like copying and pasting, it's creating something new.
Exactly.
Okay. So how does that translate into architecture, though? Are we saying AI is going to start designing buildings that look like, I don't know, melted cheese or something?
Well, there's some really interesting examples in the book. Like Fernando Salcedo, he did this experiment where he trained an AI on Zaha Hadid's work. You know her stuff.
Yeah, this futuristic-looking buildings, all sweepy and stuff.
Exactly. So he trained this AI on her work, and then he started showing it everyday objects, like just random stuff.
Like what?
Like a coffee cup, a crumpled up T-shirt, things like that. And the AI, it started seeing Zaha Hadid buildings everywhere.
Seriously? It was what? Seeing curves and stuff in a coffee cup?
Yeah. It's like it learned her style, her way of seeing the world, and then it started applying it to everything.
Wow. That is kind of trippy.
It is, right? But it also shows how our brains work, you know?
Yeah.
Like we're constantly making connections, seeing patterns based on what we've been exposed to.
Right, right. So if you feed an AI a bunch of blueprints, it's going to start seeing buildings everywhere it looks.
Pretty much. And that gets to the heart of this whole question of AI and creativity, right?
Yeah.
Like, is it really original if it's drawing from things that already exist?
But then again, don't we all do that to some extent? Like we get inspired by things we've seen, things other people have done.
Exactly. That's what makes this whole conversation so interesting.
Yeah.
It's not just about the technology. It's about what it means to be human, to be creative.
Totally. Okay, so we've got AI that might be hallucinating buildings. We've got AI that's becoming more accessible. And then there's this whole other layer of like the global impact of AI, right? Like we were talking about with Kai-Fu Lee in China.
Right. Lee makes a really compelling argument that China is in a unique position when it comes to AI. They've got a ton of data, for one thing, which is like gold for AI.
Yeah, it's like the fuel that powers the whole thing, right?
Exactly. And their culture is very much about embracing technology, pushing the boundaries. Plus, they've got a lot of government support for AI development.
So they've got the resources, the will, and the backing.
Exactly. And Lee believes that China's approach, which is very much about rapid iteration, putting AI to work in the real world, you know, it's going to have a huge impact on how AI is used everywhere, including in architecture.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Like they're not just theorizing about it, they're actually doing it, building things. And that kind of brings us back to that idea of architectural intelligence that Leech talks about.
Yes, the idea of AI as a collaborator in the design process.
Instead of just using AI as a tool, it's like AI is part of the team, right? Like bouncing ideas around, coming up with solutions.
Exactly.
Wow. So like, what does that even look like in practice?
That's the question, isn't it?
So if AI becomes this like creative partner, this architectural intelligence, what happens to the architect?
Right. Like, do we even need architects anymore if AI can do all the designing?
Yeah. Is that like the end of the profession as we know it?
Well, Leech doesn't seem to think so. He actually sees it as an opportunity, you know? Like AI can help us push the boundaries of what's possible in architecture.
So instead of replacing architects, AI could help us become even better at what we do.
Exactly. Imagine having this like inexhaustible source of ideas, this partner that can process information and generate options in ways we can't even fathom.
I mean, that's kind of exciting, right? But also a little intimidating.
Oh, for sure. It's like, are we even going to recognize the buildings of the future? Will they be so radically different, so beyond anything we could have imagined?
Right. Like, are we going to walk into a building and be like, whoa, a human did not design this?
Maybe. And I think that's part of what makes this whole conversation so captivating. It really gets at the heart of what it means to be human, to be creative. If a machine can design a building, what does that say about us?
It's like AI is forcing us to ask these really big questions about creativity, about innovation, about the role of technology in our lives.
Totally. And that's where I think Kai-Fu Lee's perspective on China becomes really relevant. You know, he talks about how China is approaching AI with this incredible sense of urgency.
Yeah, like they see it as the future and they're determined to be at the forefront.
Exactly. And that kind of ambition, that drive to push the boundaries, it's going to have a ripple effect across the entire field of AI, including in architecture.
So what you're saying is the future of architecture might be coming out of China.
It's definitely a possibility. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how their approach, which is very much about practical application, you know, solving real world problems, how that's going to influence the way we design and build.
So we've got all these different threads coming together, right? We've got AI that can potentially hallucinate designs. We've got China emerging as this AI powerhouse. We've got this whole idea of AI as a creative partner.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. But that's kind of the point of these deep dives, right? To really dig into a topic, explore all the different angles.
Exactly. And I think we've done that today. We've covered a lot of ground, but hopefully we've also raised more questions than we answered.
Always. That's what keeps things interesting. And hey, maybe some of our listeners will be the ones to answer those questions to shape the future of AI and architecture.
That's what I'm hoping for.
So if you're listening out there and you're feeling inspired, go out there and make it happen. And in the meantime, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep an eye on the ever-evolving world of AI and architecture. Until next time.
Thanks for listening. See you on the next episode of Daedalus Debugger, the architect in the digital maze. Bye!